Welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran, and today we're going to have a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, I think. And to help me do that is somebody who I've recently connected with online who does great work, and a person I really respect is Ryan Rucker, which is ironic because today we're recording this, it's Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, and it's right before game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. As anyone who listens knows, I'm a Knicks fan. Ryan is a Pacers fan. So we have waved the white flag before the battle starts and starting to talk about some other stuff. But Ryan, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Of course, thank you so much, Omar. I'm such a fan of you, obviously on a personal level and in the work that you do. So yeah, it's great to be here. And yeah, the timing of it certainly couldn't be better with our teams kind of bringing up the old rivalry. Last year, obviously, we met in the playoffs, took it to Game 7, but it was in the semiconference. But like now, one of us is going to the finals for the first time in 25 or 26
in a
years.
long time.
So, like that's a big deal. But no, I'm happy to be here with you.
Awesome, man. And like I mentioned, Ryan has a show, Courtside Forever, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, it's something that I really think that anybody who's listening would really appreciate. But what we are here to talk about, in one word, is racism. And for those who haven't been keeping up with the WNBA of this past week, there's opening night game between the Indiana Fever and Chicago Sky, which basically means Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese again, right? And nationally broadcast game in Indiana at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where the Pacers also play. And there was a lot of chatter about just racial slurs being thrown at Angel Reese when she touched the ball, and a lot of just the people talk about monkey noises in the crowd. And Dave Portnoy was courtside looking like the 15th man on the bench, and wherever he follows, that sort of rhetoric seems to trail along with him. A lot of people have disputed and debated whether this actually happened, but it was serious enough for the Sky to make a statement, the Fever to make a statement, the WNBA to launch an investigation. So Ryan, from your perspective, when you saw this start to happen and all this commentaries kind of fired up, what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, my initial reaction, I think, was like a lot of hopefully rational fans is like, yeah, that's not great. I think ultimately it's very conflicting because, like you mentioned, I'm a Pacers fan. I've been a diehard Pacers fan for 30 years. So before the Fever existed. So then naturally, once the Fever came into existence, I was like, oh yeah, like Fever. Tamika Catchings was great. Like enjoyed that in 2012 when they won the title. I was like, oh, right there for it. Admittedly, my fandom has certainly been for Pacers basketball and Fever. Like I've always enjoyed Fever. Also for the past couple of years, haven't been super good. So there's that. So I kind of follow him, or I do follow him, but certainly not maybe like people in Indianapolis. But that being said, so once Caitlin Clark joined the team, it was really strange for me as a fan because of course she was like a household name, and she's coming to Indiana, and it's honestly it's strange. It's because nobody cares about Indiana basketball. Nobody's ever cared about Pacers basketball. Nobody's ever cared about Fever basketball. So to have, what is that, like 40 of the 44 nationally televised, Fever games on TV, like it's insane. Now, that being said, to bring it to this conversation, it also means that this meteoric rise that the Fever have had, just in terms of fandom and eyes on the game, and Dave Portnoy, I doubt was ever at a game before Caitlin Clark joined the team. And obviously, admittedly, I'm not as familiar with him as a person, but what I've seen from him certainly doesn't seem to be the type of person I would enjoy, probably having a conversation with, or certainly being next to at a game. But yeah, it was disappointing to hear, and it's been disappointing to hear some of the comments that have been made, certainly at Fever games and even at away games. That being said, I'm well aware of Indiana's history. Well aware. Like I know it's a video podcast, and I am a Black man. I live in California. I'm from New York, so honestly, it makes no sense I'm a Pacers fan. But that's who I am. I loved Reggie, stuck with it. But I'm well aware of the history of Indiana as a whole. And I think the most difficult part about all of this is that when we're talking about Caitlin Clark, when we're talking about the WNBA, when we're talking about some of the treatment that Angel Reese has gotten over the past couple of years, and other Black women specifically in the W, it's like 3, 4, 100 conversations all happening at once, and it's really difficult to make a point about one without invoking another aspect of this conversation. So, it was a roundabout answer to your very simple question, but ultimately, it was certainly disappointing for sure. As the whole conversation is it's honestly, it's difficult to have.
Yeah. And, with Caitlin, I think it's the trouble of the promised star, right? Where she comes out of, and again, it's this, I likened her a lot to Larry Bird, in his early NBA career, because, and again, not to just oversimplify, but it was almost like a weird, like, great white hope type thing, and that's how Larry was portrayed. Obviously, Larry's game was so much beyond that. He's one of the greatest players to ever touch a basketball. Caitlin's game is much beyond that. I was just watching them last night against Atlanta, and she was executing pick and roll with mastery. They lost the game, but her pick and roll with Aaliyah Boston was incredible.
Her vision is top notch.
And the game is great, right? It's just what has come along with it now has become an issue. It's almost become that when somebody says they're a Caitlin Clark fan, it's almost coded for where they stand for politically and how they feel about anybody that's not white. So I guess for you, somebody who follows it, like, how do you reason with that, right? Like you said, you're a Black man who follows this team, and your best player, who's going to be in the MVP conversation for probably the rest of her prime,
for sure,
is kind of being affiliated and associated with these types of people. I mean, like, what is that like as a fan to reason with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I have to look at it from a couple different lenses. Number one, from a basketball standpoint, she is phenomenal, and quite frankly, anybody who does not see the potential or doesn't understand why, like, there's this whole Clark effect or anything, if you watch the game, if you say you're a fan of basketball and you look at her play and you like, oh, I don't get it, I question why you like basketball. Like, I question what you're seeing in terms of like the basketball being dribbled on the floor. She is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But you're right. I mean, like, with her has come a lot of just a lot of insanity, just in terms of people who I think see her as like, this white star, and oh, now I can watch the league. And I think the uncomfortable reality when it comes to the WNBA has been around for almost 30 years.
Yep.
And over the course of 30 years, I don't have the percentages, but I think it's at least 70% Black women. Like, Black women have built the league, like, bar none. But you do look at the history and you look at like some of the stars of the game, and some of the stars of the game have been Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Anna Stewart, Caitlin Clark. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And of course, you've also had Maya Moore. Of course, you've also had Tamika Catchings. You've had Lisa Leslie. You've had like a number of amazing players. But I do think it's probably safe to say that the white players who have been like really good have probably gotten maybe a little more shine than like some of the others. Like, I think of when Sue Bird retired, Sylvia Fowles, who is generational, absolutely amazing. She retired and was retiring around the same time. Sue Bird got way more flowers than Sylvia Fowles got around that. And there's a lot of things that go into it. But of course, you can also look at like, the fact that the white player was getting way more praise than Sylvia Fowles, who arguably had just as much of an impact on the actual game of basketball as Sue Bird had. I think they both, I could be wrong on this, I probably shouldn't say this into a microphone without fact checking, but I think they both have 4 titles as well. So I mean, like, their careers were very comparable while being in different positions. So ultimately I think now you have Caitlin Clark, and like you said with Larry Bird came into the league at the time that the NBA was having a real big issue with some drugs, and a lot of big issues with, like, stars being, the Black faces, the Black players of the league. And now it's like, oh, Larry Bird comes in, and Magic Johnson, who's kind of like a fun, palatable, Magic, there was a lot of racial elements even to the love for Magic, and kind of like change the game in terms of how certainly we we see things today in the NBA. So I don't know. So when it comes to like Caitlin Clark and like her fans and kind of what they bring to the table, it can be difficult to navigate because I want to wear a Caitlin Clark like jersey.
Yeah.
That she is a star of our team. But I also don't want anyone coming up and be like, oh yeah.
You're one of those guys.
Yeah, you're one of those guys. They're like, no, like I'm a Fever fan. Like I have been. So it's been strange to navigate, but it's a part of it. And like you have to have this conversation for sure.
I was watching the Celtic City doc that was on HBO a few weeks ago. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's just like, which is painful for anybody who is originally from New York City to watch something that glorifies a team from Boston for 8 or 9 episodes. But when they were talking about the Larry Bird effect, then they were interviewing like these Black Celtics fans. And they were talking about how the racial experiences in Boston and how divided it was back then and even still is today. And I feel like you have that in Indiana as well. Yeah. And I think this whole thing between Clark and Reese has really turned into this white small town thing versus the black big city thing. And where Clark went to Iowa, is from Iowa, plays in small market Indiana, right? Yeah. Where like it's like wholesome basketball is like the whole thing that Indiana talks about.
Hoosier basketball, Hoosier, yeah,
exactly. It's just like it's like we play the game the right way. This is how we do it, right?
Yeah, we grow basketball here. That was a Pacers tagline for a long time. So like I get it.
And I've been to Gamebridge I used to work for Motorola, and we sponsored or still do. They did sponsor the I Don't Work for
them. Yeah, that was the jersey patch for
the jersey patch for a while, and I did an activation event there and got to catch a game. The atmosphere is great there. It's one of the best arenas we have in the NBA.
It is.
And then you look at Angel Reese, Black woman, confident, assured, from Baltimore, playing in Chicago. And you think about the talking points on the political side from a lot of conservatives is Baltimore and Chicago are two targets, of when they want to make their points. So I think this has kind of really been festered and set up in a way to make it this big racial divide. And in a weird way, I feel like, and maybe you disagree here, is that I think the WNBA is kind of like, well, drama sells tickets, so let's go ahead and really lean into this. And it feels like they've done that. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's a different way?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, in terms of agree, disagree, I probably more agree than disagree on that. I think Kathy Engelbrecht, I think she's had some comments in the past that have been tone deaf at best when it comes to like dealing with the realities of it. Especially last year, it continued to grow, and it grew so big that it seemed like the WNBA like didn't know how to handle it. Like I don't think they didn't have charter flights when Caitlin and Angel were drafted, and then very quickly it was put together. It was like, well, you knew they were coming. Like you knew what was happening. You knew what was happening with the league. Everybody knew, but it seemed like it kind of caught the WNBA by surprise. In terms of some of the marketing, some of the things that they would like push for, like even the whole rivalry week. Clearly it's based around Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Like the Fever and Sky historically haven't had much of a rivalry. If anything, Fever haven't been good in a very, very long time. So clearly it's built around those two players. And I do think the W needs to do a better job of being aware of that. That being said, I think the fans have a huge part to play in this well, because I think the W, they look at their target market and they know what sells. Drama sells. Like, I hate it because I'm a basketball fan. Obviously, like I'm a Pacers fan, and just like obviously you're a Knicks fan, so of course you want them to go to the finals. But when I've seen discourse about like, oh my goodness, the possibility of an Indiana Oklahoma City finals is like unbearable. It's like, why? Like they're both.
Yeah, it's like a different language to people who like us who like basketball, right?
It is. So I think your average fan enjoys narratives and storylines and drama more than anything. That's why like free agency, trades, like all of the like the behind the scenes stuff gets far more coverage than the actual X's and O's. That's why somebody like Zach Lowe, who is the best at what he does, gets laid off from ESPN. He was the best, bar none, certainly my opinion, but like bar none, he was the best at what he did. But it was the X's and O's, and that doesn't sell like Kendrick Perkins. That doesn't sell like Stephen A. Smith. And same thing on the W side. So I don't know. I think, the W needs to do a better job, certainly from a corporate office standpoint, of A, protecting the players, and B, being aware of the product. But they also know what their fans like. And that's just like, you saw this past weekend or over the past couple of days. The conversation has been unbearable, like genuinely unbearable, certainly from my standpoint, who enjoys basketball. And I've talked at length, even outside of my podcast, outside of anything related to sports that I do. I've also worked with cities on DEI programs. I've worked with multiple companies in terms of improving DEI metrics, making sure that we remove racial bias from conversations. Like I'm aware of that conversation. And that's why I said earlier, it seems like there are like at least 3 conversations happening at once that people don't necessarily know how to navigate in terms of like the basketball play itself that led to all this stuff. Angel Reese pushed, was it Natasha Howard? I think she pushed her in the back. Yep. Caitlin Clark saw it, and as a teammate was like, what? Like, what just happened? No foul call. Angel Reese gets it. She's about to get a layup. Caitlin Clark takes a hard foul and like gives her a nudge to the ground. Literally, like, we as basketball fans love that kind of stuff. Like, we do. We love that kind of stuff. We love when Allen Iverson hits a 3 over Tyronn Lue and stomps over him. Like, we love like all the drama around it. So that in itself was a basketball play, and she was correctly assessed a flagrant foul. Now everything outside of that has been a whole thing. And then even like the whole like, monkey noise thing debate, that in itself is wrong. There's no getting around it. There's also been reports, and as I sit here on a Wednesday morning, like I have not done enough to look into this, but I've heard enough and read enough to question the validity of that video. I think there's enough evidence to go like, did that exist? Now, that being said, that to me is kind of like, it almost doesn't even matter, because we also know just through context and common sense that Angel Reese and plenty of other Black players have dealt with all sorts of racial issues. I'm sure in Cambridge, and certainly around the league. So kind of the whole like video being real or not, for me, it doesn't even matter, because I'm sure that she's absolutely dealt with it. But they're basketball players, and they're very good at what they do. And I hope both of them are taking all this controversy, all of this, and just taking it to the bank and making a ton of money off of this. Now, I hope they have like a group chat with, at least the 2 of them are texting back and forth. They're like, oh yeah, girl, can you see this? Like, oh yeah, this is like, I hope they're making a ton of money off of this, as all of us are kind of like fighting behind the scenes over, kind of like, what did this mean? And oh my goodness, it's crazy.
I can see the documentary now, man. Like 15 years in the future, they're going to have some weird sit down from an ESPN doc of Angel and Caitlin hashing it out and, just sweeping under the rug. I can already see it. And yeah, it's like, to your point, it's what we like about basketball. Like just to use like a Knicks Pacers reference, like if it was the 90s and, Reggie Miller pushed Anthony Mason in the back, and then on the next play, Rick Smits gets the ball in the post and Charles Oakley clocks him. Yep. We'd be like, yeah, that's tough. That's tough NBA basketball. But it's like we kind of treat a lot of these women, I think, with kind of kid gloves with that, and understand that these are professional players who are operating at high intensity. Because they're women, it doesn't make it different. It's the same thing. They're competing, they're trying to win. Switch over to the fans specifically, because this isn't an isolated incident. We've heard Russell Westbrook complain about this about fans in Utah. Going back to the 90s Knicks and Pacers, Spike Lee once said that he was threatened to be lynched by fans in Indiana. Like, that's something that was, thrown around there. We've seen it in international soccer. Mario Balotelli has had people dress up as monkeys at away games in Italian soccer. Italian soccer specifically is incredibly racist.
Yeah.
And so this stuff is there. And I guess, sometimes you operate in your own bubble and you think, why is anybody doing this? Why is anybody still resorting to this? And it's like you want to, in a utopian way, trying to think like, we move past that era of the world, but it feels like for so many people, it's not the case. So what do you think is the reason for this? Is this just kind of rabid fandom run amok? Like, I think the closest thing I could think of is last year during Knicks Pacers, and I just got so mad about Tyrese Halliburton. Like, just as irrational Knicks fan came out of me.
For sure.
That's why I don't live post during the game. So because that's when I'm at my most irrational, where
Yeah.
everything is the worst, everything is out together. So whatever, and I was just like so mad about Tyrese Halliburton. And I think like, all right, is it those moments that just expose the ugliest of the ugly side that people harbor within them? So, I mean, why do you think this sort of stuff continues to happen, where people are literally showing who they really are in front of 20,000 people to see? What do you make of that? Like, what is the cause of that in your view?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. That'd be a really good question for my therapist for sure. But ultimately, I think a lot of people, regardless of how they operate, I think a lot of people have deep-seated hatred within them, and like sometimes they cannot help but just like let it come out. I use I'll use Caitlin Clark as an example, and then we'll go into like some of the others. But like, I think some of the Caitlin Clark fans who came along, like, again, saw a white girl from small town Iowa who probably resonates with a lot of those people, dominating a black woman's sport and dominating, black Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, like all these players, just like, yeah, she's taken over. And I think that within some of that was a deep-seated hatred of black culture, black women, you name it. And obviously that is deeply wrong. And unfortunately, I think a lot of those mindsets, they've been just like society globally, certainly not just like, here in America, but like globally, I think a lot of those like attitudes have been tolerated for too long. Like somebody can say something wildly racist and be like, that's just grandma doing her thing. Oh, that's just, Aunt Susie, just, that, how she is. And like, as society, we're just not like, no, that's wrong. Like somebody shows up in monkey suits, like, get out of here. Like you're banned from this arena. Like they're let in. If I'm, whether that video is real or not, like I have no doubt that somebody at some point has probably made monkey sounds towards players, if not Angel and other players, and people around it either laughed or whatever, because they're like, oh, like we're all cheering for the Fever, so like, we'll let it slide with that person, instead of another Fever fan turning to that person saying, get out of here. Like sure, we don't want Sky to win, and yes, I'm happy they're dominating this game, but we are not going to tolerate that. I think a lot of it has just been we've allowed it to happen, which is really unfortunate. And certainly whether it be Utah, whether it be Indiana, whether it be like any of these places, you're dealing with socioeconomic issues, because the lower you get, the more expensive those tickets are. And quite frankly, you don't see, in some of those places, you don't see a lot of diversity. The lower you get in terms of like the ticket prices, which leads to a whole nother issue. And then, when we're cheering for our white star who pushes down, the black star, the other player, there's an element where I do think people see that and they're like, yeah, take her down, because they themselves want that to happen. Like they themselves want us to be in Caitlin Clark's shoes, and they resonate with that. Like, yeah, taking it to her. And I think with that, there's just this instinct that comes out where people just get super racist. And for me, it's strange, very strange, because again, like we mentioned, the WNBA is majority black women. And clearly they have not gotten the respect that they deserve ever, which is why I always, even when the Fever came out with the whole like every game's a home game, like I, as a fan, I cringed, because I was like, there is a connotation behind that that I don't love. That I think we as fans, and hopefully the Pacers as an organization, need to do a better job of not leaning into it. But I think globally we're in a tough spot right now, and people don't know how to process, people don't know how to deal, and at the same time, there's too many people that just allow that nonsense to happen. And you give an inch, they take a mile, then all of a sudden they're getting online, getting in DMs, saying super racist things towards black women, and it's catastrophic, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of the WNBA, I think for a long time, has been, I would argue, it is the most diverse league that we have in American sports, because you have multiple sexualities, you have, feminine presenting, you have non-binary type, you have the different races. Of course, now the international element is starting to become more prevalent in the W as well. And a lot of the people who have kind of been under attack politically over these past couple of years, I would say, are in the W very well represented. Black women, like you mentioned, are the predominant force in the WNBA, and that's, I think, a little bit of a different conversation than when it comes to black men, right? In the NBA. The downside of that is that when you get this white star who comes up, it just triggers all of these, tribalistic emotions that people have of wanting to, of just, being just feeling that they have a free pass to do this stuff. And I think we're in actually the interesting era where the white player is having a renaissance, and in both the WNBA and the NBA. Like, you think like Haley Van Lith just coming out in the draft, Cameron Brink, who's been a good player as well, and just like a lot of white players coming to WNBA. The number one pick in the draft is about to be a white American in the NBA, Cooper Flag, right? And we've seen, like, you look at the Bulls, it's just like, for so many years, everybody's like, oh, all these teams are all black, all black. You look at the Bulls, it's just like, it's mostly white. It's a lot of Europeans, right? But still, it's just kind of like, if that was your argument, and then, so people just kind of latch onto that and take it too far, right? And that's where we're at. So when it comes to the league, or any league really, NBA, WNBA, whatever league it might be, hockey has had its fair share of issues with this sort of stuff as well, like the stuff that PK Subban dealt with when he was in Montreal. And do you, like, how are they going to fix this? Like, obviously you can ban people from the arena, but is there really a way that a league can proactively address this and try to mitigate it from happening?
It's a really good question. I think, it is such a societal issue that I think it can be difficult, because, like, from a league perspective, I wish people understood that the WNBA, the NBA, like, they are corporate entities. And with any corporate entity, like, this is totally my opinion, but, like, we need to stop putting our faith that corporate entities who are there to make money are going to do the right thing. And because, like, there is a lot of tiptoeing, I'm sure, from owners to, like, both sides of the aisle, with all sorts of people who, in my opinion, probably are leading to a lot of these, like, issues that we're talking about. Like, even when I say, like, people just kind of tiptoe around racism, like, we look at it point blank. Like, I don't know, like, I grew up in upstate New York. I grew up in a very, like, conservative area. I personally do not identify as that, but I'm also the type of person who very much, like, I know that my idea of the world isn't the idea that like, it takes all of us coming together, all of us, kind of like arguing, coming together to go forward. Like, me and my progressive values aren't I shouldn't be the only voice in the room. I'll put it that way. So I think that corporate entities, when they're there to make money. So, of course, Kathy Ingebrigtsen, when she leans into the drama, she's leaning into the financial value, and it's working because the Fever and Sky in a regular season game had a historic number of people who are watching on a Saturday afternoon. Like, so it's working from a financial standpoint. And I think also, and then hopefully I'll get to your question just a little bit too. I think there's been fans who, they look at players as, like, activists, and I think they're looking at them to do too much. And thankfully, the W has had just some of the world's greatest activists, some of America's greatest activists. Like, you look at the 2016 Minnesota Lynx team, Maya Moore, Lindsay Whalen, like, that entire team, Sylvia Fowles, who we're talking about, like, that entire team took a very unpopular stand in 2016. They were well ahead of the curve. Like, what they did at the time, or was it 2015 or 2016, whatever it was, I mean, one of the greatest things that I've ever seen in sports. But that cannot be the job description of our WNBA players. So, like, I've even seen people talk about, like, oh, why didn't so-and-so say this? Or why didn't they do this? Or why did they answer this way? Why did they do it that way? I'm like, because they're 23-year-old girls. They're 23-year-old women. All right. And, like, whatever the case is, like, they are young and they are basketball players. Like, the activist aspect and speaking up for values, like, whether NBA, WNBA, like, it cannot be a part of the job description. Like, it's just, it's exhausting if we are expecting more from our athletes than we are from executives, from owners, from politicians. Like, I'm sure Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark probably get way more DMs than their representatives in Congress, in Senate, to do things and speak up and do all these things. So what can the league do? What they can do is something that they're not going to do. And it's really like just limiting comments. It's really not leaning into like the ESPN, like the Stephen A. Smiths of the world, not even allowing people who don't understand the league to cover the league, like not giving press passes to people who have, like Dave Portnoy. Like, I don't know how he got there, but like putting out a statement the day before saying like we don't tolerate hate here, and then probably having Dave Portnoy courtside like chumming it up with the FIFA players is probably not great optics. But like again, those are, it's talking about money making entities. I think we as fans, hopefully on social media, we can mute people who are bad actors. We can block people who are bad actors, and we can really get down to it, because even when we quote tweet somebody who we're dunking on and like, oh yeah, like I have a really good point, you're giving that person engagement. Like you're giving all these people who do not care about the WNBA's future. They don't care, but they just care about engagement. And there's so many of them out there right now. And it's unfortunate. So I don't know, like it comes down to just working, and just getting down to the product and putting on the X's and O's, and maybe you lose money in the short term, but we're going to get rid of some of this riffraff who is not here for the product of basketball. They're here for the racism. They're here for, like our Sabrina Ionescu's, and, they're dominating the game, and Caitlin Clark dominating the game, and Breanna Stewart dominating the game. It's like, yeah, I mean, like, get rid of these people who are only here for race issues, and let's just talk about hoops. Yeah. I mean, it's wishful thinking, but hopefully as fans, we can do our part.
Yeah, what gets so lost in all this is that we're really in a golden age of WNBA talent. You really think about these last 5 years, say, where all these players who have really stepped up the ceiling of the skill level here has just gone through the roof. And, I think about Caitlin, a lot of people were online saying all she had to say was, I condemn racism or something like that. And what it reminded me of was how Michael Jordan handled that sort of stuff in the 90s, and I'm not saying Caitlin Clark is Michael Jordan, right? But, you talk about face of the league type person is, a little worried about his sneaker sales, right? And the whole Republicans buy sneakers too.
Yeah.
And, that is also just kind of the vibe I got from Caitlin, where she's so PR and media trained that she doesn't want to rock that boat. And I think, yeah, it is a little bit foolish to maybe expect that. But also, when you in the league is in a difficult situation where they're trying to grow the popularity here, and they haven't seen a surge like this ever in their history, right?
Yeah.
And that's the real tough thing. And I remember a couple years back when I used to cover tech, I did, if you remember that Bud Light can controversy when they had the trans influencer with the special Bud Light can, and conservative people lost their minds. And I had an interview with somebody, and the conclusion we both made was like, look, if you're gonna expect a morality compass from a company that's publicly traded and is for profit, well, you're going to be waiting a long time. So, and that's the way I view it as well. You're going to be waiting for a long time to get this, and I think players are probably going to do it more because they have platforms.
For sure.
I've seen LeBron do that, for instance, speak about causes that are near and dear to his heart. And I think that, Angel has done a good job of highlighting that sort of stuff herself. And I'll be honest, I would like to see a little bit more of a personality from Caitlin there, even though I understand why it's being said, because, there's a lot at stake here. She has sponsorships, she has, Nike stuff, whatever. And, let's not act like they could fall back on their WNBA salary. More so than the NBA players. WNBA players need their sponsorship money even more, so they don't have to go play in Russia like Brittany Griner did, right? So, I guess final question on this before I want to kind of close to talk about your podcast, to talk a little bit about Pacers Knicks, is does all this stuff here, all like the cavalier kind of racism at sporting events, and this whole type of we're only going to back this team because of this white player, is this is kind of more of a reflection of where we are societally in America in 2025? We're in this, the first few months of this second Trump presidency that has scrubbed DEI initiatives and has, I every time I go on TikTok, I'll see some conservative white person basically saying that racism is okay, and like we're having this weird pivot because I always say with Trump, a lot of people had these dormant emotions for many years. I remember I used to work in a restaurant for a long time,
Yeah.
and this is like late 2000s, early 2010s, and they would say stuff, behind the line, and I was like, and those type of things were always there. But when you have somebody who becomes a champion of that, then you
Yeah.
feel more empowered to say something. So would you say this is all just kind of an encapsulation of where we are as a culture in 2025?
Yeah, I would think so. I think, you look at a lot of things, a lot of conversations, a lot of debates, and I genuinely, it feels like at times that like a lot of society is just is broken. They don't know how to navigate. Even, even we've talked a little bit about the video potentially being doctored. The thing is, like, as I sit here, I don't know is the short answer, but like it seems like all signs are pointed to like it probably was doctored. Like there's no other videos of it. Nobody can confirm it, like all those different things. And if it is, you have people who were loud about it and just are like, well, it doesn't matter if it's doctored. It's like, no, it does matter if it's doctored. Like, it does matter if like we fell for misinformation, and all of us are privy to it. Like, there's plenty of times I've seen something like NBA Sentinel or like whatever it is, like literally built a brand off of misinformation, and NBA players have fallen for it. Like, it is a huge part of how we operate. But like, unfortunately, as people, we lean so far into it that like when we find out that something we like genuinely believed was wrong or misinformation or doctored, we're like, well, the sentiment's still there. It's like, no, we need to acknowledge that, like, we just fell for something that was incorrect. And like, that is why all these accounts are popping up left and right that just feed misinformation. I mean, like, of course we're talking about sports, but like, absolutely, you see it's like outside of sports too. Caitlin Clark, for example, I know like you were just talking about like, and she's one of the best PR people I've ever seen. Like, she is, it's almost like LeBron-esque, and you were kind of talking about it, where like LeBron, he's had 21, 22-year career of very minimal mistakes. Like,
people still care about the decision because that's all you have.
That's all you have. And honestly, I still go back to the fact that like I had no problem with the decision, because anybody who was a fan of basketball in 2010, like from 2008, from the Olympics in 2008 up until his decision in 2010, that's all people could talk about, where he's going in 2010, where he's going. I had zero problem with the decision, because again, kind of like we were talking about with Kathy earlier, people love drama. The decision fed into that, and quite frankly, it made a ton of money. So like, I was there at my parents' house, like whatever time, I think it was like 2:00 Pacific time. Like, I was there with a couple of my buddies. We were watching, and we saw him go to Miami. We were like, wow. So, Caitlin Clark is incredibly PR savvy, but there's Indianapolis has a reporter. He used to cover the Pacers. Now I think he covers the Colts. But James Boyle. He's asked at least 3 different times, asked her point blank what she thinks about like some racism, and she always has a really good PR answer. But the root of it is there is no place for it in this game. So I always kind of look at him like she doesn't tiptoe around it. Like, she doesn't go out of her way to like put out statements. She doesn't go out of her way to say, hey, I'm going on Instagram Live to like talk about this issue. But when people ask her about it, she's point blank like, I don't want them associated with me. Like, I don't want any of this. But like, it's difficult, because I think people just want to hear what they want to hear. They want to lean into like all sorts of storylines. And Angel Reese is a phenomenal player. Like, she is. But at the same time, if you acknowledge like, hey, her field goal percentage isn't necessarily what you need from a big player in the WNBA, it's almost like it's difficult to have that conversation. Like, I was looking up earlier, and like, she last year as a rookie, she was 12th in MVP voting, which is great. And you look at some of the numbers, and like from a rebounding perspective, she is generational. And there's like misinformation even about like her getting her own rebounds because she misses so much. If you took away all those offensive rebounds from her, she would still be generational. She is an amazing player. like Caitlin Clark is like generational. But it's difficult to have this conversation because society feels like it's at a point where it's like facts genuinely don't seem to matter as much. And that's where I do think that fans, we just need to like get into it and like call out racism when we see it. I love Fever. I love the Pacers. I've been fortunate to meet some of the people in the front office. I've been fortunate to meet the owner. They are good people. Like I genuinely enjoy them as people. I love being a fan of this team, and I'm well aware of the history of Indiana, the history of Indianapolis, and like, you know, some of the fans and like all this. I'm well aware of it. And if I see that kind of thing, I don't put up with it. Like I do not deal with it. I'm also Black, so it's easier for me to say that, and I hope that it wouldn't be easier for me to say that. I hope that's just common sense. But honestly, just as fans, we need to realize that like corporations are going to corporate. That's what they're going to do. Like people who make a lot of money and want to make more money, that's what they're going to do. But you and me as fans, like when we see like our fellow fans stepping out of line, we got to either get them back in line or completely kick them to the curb. Like, you know, even, and I know we're going to talk about Knicks Pacers in a little bit, but, you know, I saw one person. So I do not want to make this like, oh, Knicks fans are doing this because this is one person. But those people who were hitting that Pacers fan with like the bag of trash, you know, so one person was like, I don't condone violence. But what was that Pacers fan doing? It's like, no, we can't do that. Like, just like me as I can't say like, well, yeah, I don't condone racism at Fever Game. But did you see what Angel Reese did? Like, no. Just shut that nonsense down from the get-go. Like, we cannot tolerate that. And I've muted so many people who are not here for basketball because like that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and you know, one last thing on Angel Reese. I think where it was almost positioned like a Bird and Magic thing. I almost feel like Angel Reese might be more like Moses Malone.
Oh, that's a good comp. I haven't heard that one.
You know, and just like, you know, the rebounding and the upside potentially of the scoring. I think if she adds a little bit of offensive game over the next couple of years, we'll see something special. But you know, it just the field goal percentage is the field goal percentage, man. You can't argue with the numbers, right? But the rebounding is still elite, you know, which is why I think there's that she had a little bit of that Moses like, and I think a lot of WNBA fans don't like when I make NBA player to WNBA player comparisons, but I'll be honest, like I really fully invested in it only a few years ago, and that's when, you know, I started to pay more attention to it, and you know that's my own fault, obviously, but you know that's you can only compare to what you know. But
for sure.
all right, Ryan, we got to talk about Knicks Pacers now. It's
we got
down to that point. As you and your listeners might know, I also do some writing for Knicks Fan TV, which is obviously a Knicks blog, and one of my first pieces was after, like, I think it was the first or second game of the season, which is the first meeting between the Knicks and the Pacers. And I basically said that this Knicks team entered the season with championship aspirations. You know, they make the big trade for Karl Towns. They re-sign OG Anunoby. They make the trade for Mikal Bridges. They have Jalen Brunson. You know, it's all these things. And I'm just like, every type of team like that needs a villain, you know, needs a motivator. And to me, it was so obviously the Pacers, because people were saying it was the Celtics because, you know, you establish this team to beat the Celtics and, you know, style of play type thing. And everybody leaned into the New York-Boston thing. Like the Knicks and the Celtics have never been good at the same time until now. Like if you really look at it.
It's true, honestly. Yeah.
When the Celtics were winning all those titles with Russell, the Knicks weren't doing anything. When the Knicks had their golden era in the early 70s, the Celtics were rebuilding from the Russell Cousy era. Yeah. And then when the Celtics became really good in the early 80s, the Knicks were like, they had Bernard and then the injuries and before they drafted Patrick. And in the 90s, when the Knicks were really good, the Celtics were in their worst era, you know? So it's never been good at the same time. So the rivalry hasn't really happened. You know, it doesn't exist outside of Boston, New York. And you could argue New York Philly is a bigger rivalry than Celtics Knicks. But the Pacers, in my lifetime, and I'm 38, every time we've been good, the Pacers have also been good, right? And so, like, you look back into the Ewing era, that's the Reggie Miller era, that's the era that both of us, you know, developed our fandoms. Then into the late 90s into the 2000s, when you had the twilight of Reggie's career, and the Knicks kind of had retooled with Allen Houston and Larry Johnson. and the end of Ewing's career. Then the Paul George era comes around, and it's when the Carmelo era is there. And then you have the famous verticality or Hibbert block that still, haunts me to this day. And then now you have Halliburton and Brunson, and it's just like, and then it goes back to the Midwest thing and the big city thing, and both places love basketball, but in different ways,
For sure.
And then you look at Brunson, grew up in Chicago, playing in New York, playing in Dallas, always around the big market. Halliburton from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, right? It's just two different worlds, right? And they finally collide again. And of course, they had the series last year. So going into this as a Pacers fan, they have proven themselves to be one of the better teams in the league, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Make good work at Cleveland, and they beat the Bucks. So what's your confidence level right now going into this series?
It's funny, as a fan, I'm not, I like to say I'm not superstitious. I'm probably a little stitious. So it's like I feel good. I mean, like, and I say this at this point, like any of the 4 teams could win the championship, and I would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense for reasons A, B, and C. But in terms of Pacers have just as much of a shot as anyone, and I think it comes down to how they want to play or how they decide to play. Historically, Pacers have been pretty good on rest. Obviously, they started the season really poorly. You can go back to last season. Last season, they ended with Tyrese Halliburton injured. You lose the series, and obviously, even if he was healthy, like, they still would have lost against the Celtics. But then he goes into the Olympics and gets injured a little bit again, and then goes into like training, gets injured a little bit again. He starts the season, and they start off really slow. Start off famously 10-15, so not good. And I remember listening to a lot of the Pacers podcasts and reading the blogs, and we have Caitlin Cooper, who is an amazing writer. We have Setting the Pace, which is an amazing podcast for it. I'm listening to it, and everyone's just like, hey, it's not great, but also it's still early. And then they get a little break because they did terrible in the in-season tournament. They had like almost a week break, and they come out of that, and they're good. And Andrew Nemhart's back, and Aaron Nesmith's back, and then they get their legs under them, and they're good. And then they have an all-star break, and they come out of all-star break, and they're good. And I don't know. It's funny because there's a lot of Pacers fans who are like, oh, they never talk about some national media. Nobody ever gives us love. Roy Hibbert famously was like, yo, MFers, don't watch us. I don't care because I have League Pass. I would rather watch my local people anyway. Like I mentioned, Caitlin Cooper, Alex Golden of Setting the Pace. Like, we have amazing people who follow the team. I get all my Pacers info from like Pacers people from Indianapolis. I don't need Stephen A. Smith. I don't need Kendrick Perkins like talking about their hot takes around. I don't care. Also, as confusing as it might be for some people, I'm also a Yankees fan and a Giants fan, so I'm well aware of the big market and how it's not always fun. Because you go on and people are questioning Aaron Judge's character and how he should, maybe not his character, everyone loves his character, but like questioning little things about him. Abdul Carter is like in the news for like, what number is he going to pick, all these different things. And honestly, just as a Pacers fan, I don't know, I just kind of like watching Aaron Nesmith go off for a game here, there, TJ McConnell go off for a game here, Andrew Nemhard, Pascal Siakam, all these people do things under the radar. So like, what's my confidence level? It's as high as it could be. Like, I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, they're gonna sweep them or they're gonna win in 7. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, if either team swept, I'd be like, I mean,
I'd be surprised if any team swept.
I certainly would be surprised, but like, at the same time, I was pretty surprised by how they handled the Cavs. But also, I've been watching them long enough to realize when they get going, there's almost nothing you can do to stop them. Like, all of a sudden, like, Ben Shepherd's in the game, like our 10th person off the bench or 10th person, and all of a sudden he's hitting like 3 or 4 threes, and you're like, what is happening here? Like, as a fan, that's a lot of fun. So I'm here for the ride. I mean, like, my case for the Pacers, of course, as a Pacers fan, my case is that if Halliburton could get 18 and 10, if he can get assists going, get other people in, if he can get Aaron Nesmith some easy shots, Cat's gonna be a monster. Like, it's funny because I listened to somebody on the national podcast talk about like Cat's numbers against Indiana, and they were like so baffled. And I'm like, I've watched when he was in Minnesota and in New York, I've watched those games. Cat just feasts on whoever is on him. Typically Miles, who doesn't do as great on the perimeter as he does, kind of back to by the hoop. But that's gonna be tough. But I kind of want to see like Nesmith or like even Nemhard on Cat a little bit and just kind of switch things up. But ultimately, we're deep. That's what it comes down to. But the 7 that are going to play for the Knicks are tough. They are tough. Brunson is otherworldly. And like there's this clutch gene that he has. I know he was the clutch player of the year, but oh my goodness, when he has the ball with 10 seconds left in the game and it's close, you're almost surprised when he misses. And he is just, I don't know, like if you ask like 30 executives like who you want to start a team with, if you have one game to win, is it Halliburton and Brunson? You probably got more people that pick Brunson than Halliburton. And I, as a Pacers fan who's a huge Tyrese fan, I'm well aware of that. But ultimately, I've got confidence. It'll be fun. I'm just excited to see the type of game that the Pacers play, because they also are known for going down early, and sometimes they can't come back from it. In the series or in this postseason, they've had at least 2 games that they were down big and they miraculously came back from. But I'm like, the further you go against better teams, you can't rely on that. And sometimes Pacers do. So that makes me a little nervous, but we'll see. I think Carlisle's a brilliant coach. I think Jenny Busick, we have Lloyd Pierce. We have a brilliant assistant. So I'm excited for the game plan that they bring. Honestly, I think the coaching matchup is what I'm looking forward to most out of anything. So.
The thing with the Pacers that they've kind of had to deal with from a talking point perspective is everybody has kind of almost delegitimized their run this year and their run last year by saying, well, all these other teams are hurt, right? And you look at it, it's like this year you had, I think the Cleveland point is kind of invalid because it was really the one game and then everybody was back. You don't know how banged up everybody is. What's the playoffs? Everybody's banged up.
Yeah.
And then, no Dame in the Milwaukee series last year against the Knicks. Knicks game 7, half the roster was gone. Just now they play a healthy Knicks team, that isn't missing anyone. All their top 7 guys are there. And so it's a great test for them. And, for my first real introduction to Halliburton when I was really looking at him was last year's series. And obviously I'll watch the Pacers on League Pass. It's tough when you're a fan of a East Coast team.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's like you got to pick and choose where you watch. Yeah. It's tough, right? But one thing, obviously, they play with pace, and that's kind of an interesting thing because of the way that the different styles that the Knicks have had to encounter here. They play muck it up Detroit in the first round. Then they play pace or just spacing, but also still kind of deliberate Celtics team, especially with Tatum in the games that Tatum was there. And then now they play this run and gun Pacers team. It's just all the different type of things. And to your Cat point, I think that's a good one because Cat loves when they put bigs on him. He just loves them because he has a little bit of a dribble package, so he could kind of create space on above the break threes and hit them at pretty good rates. Yeah. But when they have these longer defenders on them, it becomes a little different. It's why the Pistons threw Tobias Harris at him. It's why the Celtics threw a lot of smaller guys on. They didn't throw Horford or Cornette or Porzingis at him. They threw, they would throw Brown on him. They throw White on him, just to try and bother him. And I wonder, because you think that Carlisle will probably want to put Nesmith on Brunson because that's the type of player that has given JB problems over the years is big physical wings as opposed to smaller guards. When you put a Jaylen Brown on him, it became a little bit difficult. But when you put Peyton Pritchard and Derek White on him, he just oh, this is food, and that's basically what it became. So I'm interested in it from that perspective, from the Knicks side here in terms of expectations. To be honest, Ryan, we don't know how to act right now. Because listen, I'm 38, man. We haven't been here since I was 13 years old. Okay.
I'm 38 as well. So our timelines are very similar.
Yeah. So the Pacers got to the conference finals last year. They've had a decent run of success, right?
Yeah.
The Knicks have not had that, and it's just been misery on top of misery on top of misery.
And the owner, James Dolan, too, as an owner, just seemed to meddle, which I always find funny. It was the second it seems like he was all right, let me finally get out of here. It's all right, cool.
When they hired Leon Rose, he was all right, I'm out of here. I'm gonna focus on the sphere, right? That's just what he's gonna do. And and surprisingly, when that happened, you hear Dolan interview. I think he understands that this isn't his place, and it took him a while to get there, and he's just kind of I'm just going to collect the check, and that's basically where I'm at.
Money. Yes.
Yeah, he's going to make his money. The team is incredibly valuable. MSG is incredibly profitable as well. So that's the thing there. And so we haven't had this, right? And a lot of people were making comments like, "Oh, they're celebrating a second round win like they won the championship," and I'm just like, you can't tell us don't act like you haven't been there when we literally haven't been there in 2.5 decades, And it's just like I would expect, like if you guys win this series, right? I would expect Indianapolis to go crazy because you haven't been in the finals in that long, right?
Yeah.
Like you made the conference finals last year, So now it's about taking the next. And so when I think about this matchup, I'm really looking at how they want to guard Brunson, how they're going to deploy Anunoby defensively against the Pacers. Do you just say, okay, you got Pascal Siakam, stop him? Because I think if you put Anunoby on Halliburton, that's a mistake. Because Hallie is going to be able to get by OG, I think, more times than not. And I love OG as a defender, but I think he's better on wings.
Yeah.
I think you probably want to put Mikal Bridges on Halliburton just from a length perspective. Two long guys, right? And and Bridges had a nice defensive series against Boston and was able to kind of D up on those guys when asked. But it's this depth versus this consolidated lineup, right? Argument that you're going to have, and I don't know which way it's going to go. As a Knicks fan that's seen a lot of disappointment, I am. I'm not optimistic at all. You wonder how long. Like we weren't supposed to be here, really. It was supposed to be Boston, and then you guys could say the same thing. It's supposed to be Cleveland. Yeah.
Let's go into the second round. We're like, oh well, it was a fun story.
Good season. See you next time. And it's just like it's just not that. And I do want to bring up. I think you alluded to earlier in the show here about that one fan who threw a trash bag at a guy wearing a Halliburton jersey. Knicks fans, we gotta be better, man. Like, I get it. All right, I get it. We are so passionate, and I think the great thing about the Knicks fan base as a whole is that we are probably the closest thing to European soccer fans that we have here in the U.S.
Yeah,
and we haven't won in a long time. And I get that. That doesn't mean you harass Brian Windhorst. That doesn't mean you throw trash at a Pacers fan for wearing a Halliburton jersey. And people are saying, "Oh, what are you doing? Where on 7th Avenue wearing a Halliburton jersey? He's like the most hated guy in New York right now." Whatever. It's like you just don't throw trash at people.
For sure.
Talk shit. Do whatever you want to do. That's fine.
Yeah.
But when it gets physical, that's the real issue. And so I'm excited for the series, man. I really believe it goes 6 or 7, one way or the other. And
yes.
It just feels like such an interesting matchup, more so than what we have in the West. Like, I don't know if you watched Game 1 yesterday, OKC.
I did.
But like OKC, when they decide they just want to ramp up the ball pressure, you can't do anything. There's nothing you can do, and so I think the East series is a little more interesting. I think OKC is the best team left, to be honest. If any other teams won, I would not be surprised, to your point.
Yeah.
But it feels like they're at a level defensively that everybody else isn't. And but I guess one last question on the series before I want to talk about your show is who, if you had to pick a couple guys from each team that you think are the most important to success, what would you say those players are for both the Pacers and the Knicks?
Yeah, good question. I think for the Knicks, I mean, I'll try not to state the obvious, but I think Josh Hart gave us a ton of issues last year. Funny enough, Hartenstein actually gave us a lot more issues, and he's not there anymore, so I'm curious about that. But Josh Hart, just from his position, his tenacity, the man is tough as nails. So I think he's somebody like, if you see him dropping like 18, I think it's going to be a tough night for the Pacers. Anything like that, because come along with the 18 points will also come probably like 18 rebounds that he just, he's brilliant, and he's just able to like get in there. So I think Josh Hart in the starting lineup for sure. Mitchell Robinson, I think is somebody as well. I'm curious how that's going to go. And then last year, there were a number of people on the Knicks bench, whether it be like foul trouble. Pacers are probably going to try to get into the lane and try to cause some fouls on some players. So, maybe some of like the ended bench players. I'm curious if there's going to be one person who's not in that top 7, top 8-ish.
I mean, probably Precious Achiuwa campaign. Yeah.
For sure. So I think that's another person to look out for on the Knicks. I think on the Pacers side, in the starting lineup, it's going to be Nembhard. He's going to be somebody who, if he's able to like go off on the offensive end, which is going to be great. And then defense, I think he guarded, Dame Lillard in the first round. He guarded Donovan Mitchell. And the funny thing is, Donovan Mitchell went off for like insane numbers, but
He was bad.
he did at the end of game 2. He missed 2 crucial free throws that essentially allowed Tyrese, not directly, but like it allowed Tyrese to kind of make the comeback that he did. He also had like an offensive foul that he probably wouldn't have had if he wasn't so dog tired. A lot of that came from Nembhard. And then same thing at the end of game 5. Like, he missed 3 crucial free throws. He did hit a 3 like 20 seconds later, kind of made up for it. But like, he missed those 3 free throws because Nembhard was all over him. So I think Nembhard, if he can tire out Brunson and just prevent him from going for 40, if he can go for 30, I think that'd be great. So that's some starting lineup. And then for the bench, I'm going Jarris Walker. And this is kind of like a little bit of like a deep cut. But I say that because I think we're going to have some struggles with Cat for sure. But if Jarris Walker can get in there, and I think his wingspan is like 7'2", like when he is on, he is on. And from a defensive end, we're really going to need that. He shoots a couple more threes than I would like as a fan. I kind of wish he would just kind of like take his game down low and be like, bro, you're huge. Just like stop shooting 25 footers. Like, you're huge. Get in there. But on the defensive end, I think if he can give us 10 minutes a night of just really wearing down Cat specifically, and even guarding Brunson. I think he guarded Brunson a little bit in like game 6 and 7 last year that were like pretty, I could be wrong on that, but I think so. That was like really beneficial for the Pacers. That could be like really huge. But obviously, what Tyrese are we going to get? Is he going for 25? Is he going for 2? Like, we need a little more consistency from our guy right there. But he's showed time and time again that if he puts up 2, he's probably going to show up the next game. So I'm hoping for no 2-point, because I can't handle the texts and the DMs that I get.
One thing, my criticism of Tyrese for a long time has been when it's winning time.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like he reminds me of early stage LeBron, where he was always just looking to make the right basketball play.
Yeah.
And not just say, all right, saddle the fuck up, I'm the guy. Let me take us to the promised land. Yeah. And I think as a New York basketball fan, I value that a little bit too much. So, and I think there is something to be appreciated about making the right basketball play. And he does that time and time again. His passing is elite. He doesn't turn the ball over a ton. But offensively as a scorer, he can be passive at times, But when you got guys like Nembhard taking big shots, Siakam making big shots, and that's that. For me, the most important Knicks, obviously Brunson goes without saying. It's the same way for Halliburton. Those are your fulcrums. Those are your most important guys. But I'm going to go with Miles McBride for the Knicks because he was terrible in the Pistons series.
Okay.
But he was really good against Boston. And if the shots are going in and you could kind of use him to kind of, to your point about Nembhard wearing down Brunson, to wear down Halliburton a little bit, to really pick him up 94 feet every now and then for a few minutes, I think you can see some dividends there, and he's a big part of the series. And I agree with the Mitchell Robinson thing. The Pacers are not a great offensive rebounding team. Mitchell Robinson's one of the best offensive rebounders in the league. I think they're going to try and Caitlin Cooper actually made a good point about this, where she was saying that, Tyrese doesn't like to box out. So if the focus is preventing Mitchell Robinson, and you're probably going to have Tyrese deployed on Josh Hart as kind of like just, he's the worst shooter on the floor.
Yeah. Just
put him on there. That's going to open up lanes for him. But a lot of that gravity comes to Mitchell Robinson. And I'm wondering, obviously Missoula did the hack and Mitch thing, and I'm wondering if Carlisle will deploy it as well. And
I'm curious.
He probably will. The Celtics, they kind of it worked out in some ways, but then one game he goes 6 for 6. So you don't know with Mitch. I think if they do go there, I think if you could just get 50%, at least you're getting a point every time. Then that's something. For the Pacers, I think Aaron Nesmith is the most important player in this series. The corner 3 for him is a high percentage shot.
Yeah.
And defensively, he's going to be deployed on Brunson a lot. And because I really think if they deploy Nembhard on him too much, it's food. It happened last year in the series when Nemhard was on the first couple games.
Yeah.
And he got cooked by Brunson because Brunson is just waiting for you to throw a small guard on him. Even McConnell, when he's like a pest or whatever, McConnell's his pest, like he still got cooked by Brunson at the end of the day. Brunson struggles with the bigger wing defenders, so you got to throw Nemhard on, or sorry, Neesmith on him.
Neesmith, yeah.
And then beyond that, I would say I think Miles Turner is a big one for sure. As far as above the big stretch five, are they going to throw Cat on him, or are they going to try and maybe mix in Anunoby there? That's kind of interesting to me because Miles will shoot the three and with really good proficiency as well. And so that becomes an interesting player for me. And as a shot blocker, right, on defense, where Bridges, Hart, Brunson, they're all going to try and drive. Cat is going to try to do those freight train drives that never look like they're going to end well. And and Turner's going to be there as a rim protector. We saw when Boston deployed Luke Cornett, and he was just kind of feasting on blocked shots that one game.
That was great.
Yeah, so that would be something I would look for Turner. But I'm excited for the series, man. I can't wait, and I'm probably going to have an anxiety attack every single game, just because, like I said, it's uncharted territory for me for many years now, where we just haven't been here before. So I'm very much looking forward to it. But I do want to close out here talking about your show, Courtside Forever, and you had made a post on Threads a couple weeks ago, and I saw it, and I was like, hey, let me check out this podcast. And you sent me the link, and I took a look. And so I listened to 2 episodes of it so far. And I listened to your one episode. You had somebody from youth soccer talking about what that's like. And then your last episode where you had your daughters on talking about how the Pacers were saved by the Leonard family.
Yeah.
And so if you could just take a couple minutes here, just talk about, what motivated you and inspired you to create this show and really what's it all about.
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, I'm a dad. I've got 2 girls, 8 and 5. And I love fatherhood, long story short, for me, my dad wasn't around when I was growing up. And, so when I became a dad, it was just kind of fatherhood was like this thing where I was like, I really want to do it right. And, so that's always been a big part of my story. And then a couple of years ago, I actually wrote a children's book about ice cream. I'm also an ice cream maker. I don't do it like professionally anymore, but I used to make it for like a coffee shop, and like I make it for fun. And so I love ice cream. So I wrote a children's book called Is This Your Favorite Ice Cream? And it's about a father and a daughter traveling the country to find their favorite ice cream. And in the book, just kind of in the dedication, I wrote, to my girls, I'm forever sitting courtside cheering you on, which actually in a roundabout way comes from Spike Lee. Because Hassan Minhaj was on a podcast years ago, and he was talking about how we views fatherhood as having like front row seats, the best seats in the house, Spike Lee seats to every game. And his idea was like, ultimately you don't get to control what's happening, but you're there and you get to witness it all. And as a sports fan, especially as a basketball fan, I always love that analogy. It's just like, oh, of course So, a couple months ago, I thought, I was like, I know there's a lot of people doing podcasts, but like I've been interviewing people professionally. I'm a recruiter, have been for a long time. So I professionally interview people. Like that's what I do. And I was like, I think I'm pretty good at it. So let me see if I can have some conversations with folks. I'm also a writer. So let me see if I can mix between like some solo episodes, some interview episodes where I can talk to people, specifically people who are involved in sports and also parenting, to talk about how we can be intentional parents, be the best parents, and enjoy sitting courtside for our kids. So that's where it came from. And I just released episode 28. So I've been doing it now for a couple months now, and it's so much fun to do. And what's really funny, and like sometimes when it comes to like the podcast game, it can be tough to get off the ground. But last week I was walking past my daughter's room like in the morning, typically before she gets up, and I hear a voice in there. I was like, what is she listening to? And I hear my voice, and I was like, oh, she's listening to my podcast, so that was like the best ringing endorsement I could ever get. So so Courtside Forever, that's the podcast. It's so much fun to do. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it really has resonated with me. So for the longest time, I was kind of content with the fact that I was probably never going to have kids. And I got into my current relationship, and my partner, she had 4 kids from a previous marriage, and you know, and then so I've become integrated into their lives as kind of like this male adult figure,
Yeah.
and so the two older kids are teenagers, so teenagers are going to teenage, you know,
Yep.
that's what it is. But
Yep.
the two younger, they're kind of similar age to your daughters. So the youngest, he's going to be 6 next month, and
Oh,
the
cool.
oldest, she just turned 9. The older one, she just turned 9. So
Yeah.
you know, and you know, you have these kind of moments, and you know, as a result, like of me being so into basketball now, they've kind of, you know, they want to like shoot around and play one-on-one all the time, and all this stuff, and it is something special that is, I think, a little underreported, right? And
Yeah,
everybody just kind of says, "Yeah, man, this is awesome," but no one really like dives into why it's awesome, right?
for sure.
And so I do appreciate your show from that respect. And, you know, definitely, yeah, I was kind of like, at first I was like, oh, it's kind of about parenting. I was like, I don't know if I like this. So I was
Yeah.
like, well, yes, my guy Ryan, I'll give it a listen. And
Yeah.
and again, I was listening to the episode about youth soccer, and I was like, damn, this is enlightening, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it's kind of wild. So yeah, you do great work, man. I really
Thank you.
do
Likewise.
appreciate. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, this has been awesome. I always say like, oh yeah, I want to make these episodes shorter, 30 to 45 minutes, and here we are, we've gone for over an hour. But
That's all good. All good
it's a
stuff.
great
Yeah.
conversation. Ryan, is there anything else that you'd like where people can follow you at, or any other work you got going on right now?
Yeah, no, Threads is the place to be. I love Threads. I was a long time Twitter user, and then a couple years ago, like just the algorithm and everything, it started. It was like it just wasn't as fun being on Twitter. So jumped over to Threads because I spent a lot of time on Instagram and Threads, and obviously integrated there. But I'm trying to bring a lot more stuff to my website, which is just ryanrucker.com. So all my writing is housed there. You know, I have a lot of stuff that is there, whether it be like related to books, future things. But yeah, day-to-day stuff, especially anything related to Pacers. It's all going to be on Threads. So at Ryan Rucker, easy to find me.
Yeah, so make sure to give Ryan a follow there on Threads, and to check out his podcast, Courtside Forever. All the links to those places will be in the description of this show. If you like this episode, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, with a video feed on the Spotify app if you need to see people yapping into a camera for a little bit. So, Ryan, thanks again for joining me. This is a blast. Can't wait to do it again.
Likewise.
Thank you, everybody, for joining for another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast, and we'll see you next time.